The Arab League is divided over a Qatari proposal to send troops into Syria. Tunisia's president has warned it could see violence flare up across the whole region. Well, the Emir of Qatar is leading the calls for Arab action in Syria to put a stop to the 10-month-long fighting there. He was also a key player in the Arab League's role in opposing Colonel Gaddafi's rule in Libya. Meanwhile, Syria has announced a release for prisoners jailed during the uprising. The move complies with the Arab League peace plan, which Syria accepted in November. RT's Sarah Firth reports now from Damascus.
Free at last. Streams of people leave this Syrian prison into the arms of eagerly waiting family and friends, embracing and kissing loved ones who haven't been seen for many months. Prisoners delighted and relieved to have been given back their freedom. We're here at this prison on the outskirts of Damascus. These are the prisoners who've been selected for release this evening. You can see them there signing out, and this is being overseen by some of the Arab League observers who've been here. This is part of the amnesty announced by President Assad, but of course for everyone who's now being released from detention, questions being asked about exactly why they were detained in the first place.
I've been in prison for 4 months. I was accused of weakening national security. I didn't protest. They brought me here by mistake. The amnesty is a good step. I just hope it includes everyone.
I had some weapons I had inherited from my grandfather and was accused of bearing illegal weapons. I've been here 3 months. When people heard about the amnesty, they were ecstatic. They never thought this could happen.
The amnesty announcement follows calls from Qatar's leader for Arab military intervention in Syria if the violence doesn't stop. UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon urged President Assad to end the bloodshed and said the age of dynasties and one-man rule in the Arab world was at an end. Some critics, however, feel these statements risk inflaming an already highly volatile situation.
The amnesty shows that Syria is trying to find a political solution rather than a security solution, and that the country is succeeding in implementing the plan agreed by the Arab League.
The move, though, has been described by some opposition groups as being little more than a gesture.
When all political prisoners and everyone arrested since the beginning of the crisis have been released, then the amnesty will have been effective. But the NCC does not consider this the start of dialogue.
But for reunited families, that gesture's a welcome one. Hundreds, it's hoped, will be freed over the coming days. But outside the prison walls, and people in the country remain trapped in a situation of escalating violence, from which so far there seems to be little escape. Sarah Firth, RT, Damascus.
Well, let's talk more on this with Asia Times correspondent Pepe Escobar, who joins us live via broadband from Bangkok. Thanks for being with us, Pepe. Political prisoners are leaving their cells in Syria, but the Arab League still wants to discuss intervention. How realistic a scenario is that as you see it?
Look, it's very complicated because when we talk about the Arab League nowadays, this means the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, 6 countries, the Persian Gulf monarchies led by Saudi Arabia, with also Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, the Emirates. The problem is inside the GCC there's a consensus. This is a total clash between the Persian Gulf monarchies against Arab secular republics. It was the case with Libya, it's the case with Syria as well. Other members of the Arab League are not so sure. Even Tunisia is saying that if there is an Arab League coordinated intervention in Syria, this could be a horrible business because they know about the possible repercussions. Egypt is not saying anything about it as well. So the conflict inside the Arab League is not a conflict at all. It's a sort of hegemony by the GCC. And don't forget, the GCC is closely allied with the US and with NATO. So one side we have US, NATO, GCC, the Persian Gulf monarchies. On the other side we have Russia, China, Iran, and a great deal of the developing world for that matter who don't want an overall war in the Middle East, starting in Syria. So the battle lines are more or less drawn. So we're going to see from now on this a game of positioning on This is very dangerous because it could lead to an escalation. Another point that I think is very important, what the Emir of Qatar said about a possible intervention in Syria was an interview he gave to CBS in November. So everybody is asking, why release the contents of the interview only now, almost 2 months later?
Let's focus specifically on the contents of that interview. The Emir of Qatar, like you said, itself a monarchy, pushing for intervention in Syria. It was a major sponsor of the intervention in Libya. What is in it for Qatar here?
Well, it's the whole reorganization of the Arab world, more or less coordinated by the Persian Gulf monarchies. And it's absolutely incongruous with the idea of a pro-democracy Arab Spring. Don't forget that all these regimes are autocracies, that the local populations have no possibility of political expression. Some of them, their own populations, like in the case of Bahrain, 70% Shiite population, they are treated as second-rate citizens. And now we have the Persian Gulf monarchies trying to teach the world lessons on democracy. Like the whole thing, the whole scheme is absolutely absurd to start with. So can you imagine if we had what we've seen in Syria, inside eastern Saudi Arabia, for instance? Obviously, no calls for democracy, no calls for deposing the government, like Qatar is saying nowadays. Imagine, not only imagine, look at what happened to Bahrain since the beginning of the pro-democracy protests in Manama, almost a year ago. The repression was total, with help from Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. So the same Persian Gulf monarchies who are saying now to the world, we must intervene on the behalf of people in Syria, they would smash their own people in any possibility of an Arab Spring in any of the 6 Persian Gulf monarchies.
Just briefly, Pepe, some are saying that the West is not interested in making Syria's President Assad actually put an end to the bloodshed, and that the real agenda is pushing him for being an ally of Iran. How true do you think that is?
It's absolutely true. In fact, Iran has been saying through different officials these past few days that if Syria is destabilized, they will support Syria. And of course, Russia will support Syria as well, not only because of the Russian naval base at Tartus port in the Mediterranean as well. So you know, the whole... What's happening in Syria is a microcosm of everything that is happening around the Middle East. Like I said before, it's Washington, NATO, and the GCC, the Persian Gulf monarchies, and most of the developing world on the other side. So it's a game of shadows, and Syria is a pawn in this game. Even though, of course, people in Syria are suffering, people are being killed, and the repression by the regime is heavy-handed because it is a hardcore repressive police state, in fact. But the only solution would be more or less what the Assad government is trying to do. Amnesty, let's try to sit down. We don't deal with terrorists, as they say, because there are some Sunni Al-Qaeda jihadist sort of terrorists infiltrated in the protests as well. But it's also, there are legitimate protests by the young generations in Syria. So the only solution would be, from the part of the Assad government, a little bit of political acumen here. Let's sit down and let's talk to some legitimate opposition, and not, of course, to people who are killing Syrian soldiers and Syrian political officers.
All right, Pepe Escobar live with us on the line from Bangkok. Thank you very much for your analysis.